So spammers are a group of people who probably have an approval rating as a profession right above people who lick feet for a living. I would like to bring you along on a journey of a man who rose up the ranks of his fellow vermin to become the spam king. And I would also like to show you his fall from grace, as his address was leaked online and some well-needed karma was returned to the spam king. The hatred for spammers, people who spam emails, junk mail, it's one of those hatreds that truly just crosses like all socioeconomic, political, racial, religious lines. Everyone hates these people, so it's interesting to see who actually would become one, and if there's any kind of template to be learned from this. Apparently it's from selling insurance. According with an interview with the Detroit News, Alan Ralsky was a self-made entrepreneur who learned the insurance game in a 3-day cram course in Chicago in 1976. And during the mid-80s, he was making $500,000 a year apparently from selling insurance. And he was able to have a very nice life for himself. He had a very nice home in the suburbs with, 2 dogs, 3.5 children, the true, American life. However, for whatever reason, as Ralsky tells it, things kind of soured for him after he left the insurance business in 1988 for whatever reason. Ralsky then sold real estate, which also worked pretty well, but then the economy tanked, and so did the real estate market. He then apparently bounced from job to job selling stereo equipment and doorway mats, which I guess is a traveling salesman job that you can have. And things seemed to hit a particular low mark for Ralsky, as between 1991 and 1995, he declared bankruptcy and was sentenced to 3 years probation and $74,000 in restitution on a Michigan felony related to false bank documents. He also served 50 days in a county jail and was ordered to pay $120,000 in restitution on a plea bargain misdemeanor of failing to deliver on contracts after he reinvested seniors' pension in the telecommunications company. Real Better Call Saul material right here already. And, definitely not connected to those previous things in like any way whatsoever. In 1996, he lost his license to sell insurance. Now, it was at this point that Ralsky could look at himself in the mirror and really bunker. No, he wasn't going to do that. He was going to figure out how to scam some more people. And just like in the same way, like in a Hallmark movie, the ultimate, player got his heart broken, and that's like his origin story for being a player. It's the same thing that happened with Ralsky, as he was on his last legs and he took his last $1,000 and gave it to some Canadian who said, "I can multiply your investment," and then lost everything. But instead of like everyone else who would have been like, "Dang, I really need to learn from the error of my ways," Ralsky was like, "I bet I could do this to other people." And so Alan sold his car, bought 2 computers, taught himself how to use them, and then set about learning how to spam people to death. Alan would buy these special discs that would have millions of emails on them for like $30 a pop, until he collected enough of them such that he had 150 million email addresses. And from that, he began spamming the ever-loving life out of them. He also had this very insidious method about it, where if you press the unsubscribe button in the email, it actually just confirmed that this was an active email, which made you an even more higher priority target for these spam emails. Alan then set about selling, his email list services to any disreputable company that would pay him to use it, such as weight loss pills, Enchila Farms. But his true bread and butter seemed to be just good old-fashioned American pump and dump stock schemes. And that way, he was very much the first crypto influencer. So the way that he would actually do this is he would acquire a large volume of penny stocks or, just completely worthless or made up shares in companies that had no prospects whatsoever. And then he would set about emailing his 150 email addresses with these emails that would read "new internet IPO." And because of just the sheer volume of numbers of emails that he was sending out, some people would actually fall for these worthless scams and buy these stocks. And then once they had been raised to an acceptable level for him, he would then dump them, selling all of them, leaving the poor people who had bought them with these now worthless stocks. It was a complete and unadulterated fraud. Alan knew this, but he also like really tried to make it seem like he was running a legitimate business. He said about calling himself the chief executive, and he began naming other members of his family like with these official business titles, and he was using these like domain names and sounding very official to, you know, trick more people and get more email addresses. At his height, man was sending out 1 billion emails a day. That is Mr. Beast levels of being a parasite. So if you got spam email during this time, there is a very good chance it came from this guy. And if you were wondering, yes, he did enjoy the fruits of his labor. One of his neighbors remarked that I always thought that he won the lottery or something because he was always doing never-ending renovations on his house. I mean, it was just renovations, renovations, renovations. And if Alan had been a little bit smarter about this, he probably could have went about doing this for, you know, much longer. But they say that pride cometh before the fall. And Alan had a lot of pride. He possibly bought into the I'm a real company shtick a little bit too much himself, because one thing that you will see throughout this entire thing, Alan had no problem talking to the press. He always tried to portray himself as like, I'm just a businessman, you know, I'm just a commercial emailer. Now, no one ever took him on his word on that, but he consistently stuck to like, well, why is everybody mad at me? You know, I'm just a small businessman. And in an article in a local Detroit paper in 2002, he talked about his massive giant mansion that he had and was also apparently, you know, expanding on every day. And this brought him a little bit of, you know, public scrutiny. And after this interview came out that, you know, just highlighted just how much money this guy was making from, you know, spamming your email 40 times a day, some people over on the forum /dot got together and began figuring out how the favor could be returned. And if you go over to the archive site, you can really just see the plan being formed in real time. As one user said, how about if everyone in the Detroit area who hates spam would find this guy's address, go to his house, and go and ring the doorbell. If enough people do this and they space them out time-wise, then he can get settled in from answering the door right before the next ring of the doorbell. And then like immediately afterwards, someone found like the actual like deed of sale for his house and, you know, posted the address in the chat, which makes me wonder if this is like the actual first documented case of like internet doxing. All the reporting at the time is talking in this completely neutral tone of it's like, yes, they have found an aerial view of his home and they know his whereabouts. But eventually users settled on the way to truly get back at Ralsky was to sign him up for every possible piece of physical spam to be sent to his home address. At the peak of this revenge scheme, Ralsky was receiving hundreds of pounds of spam every day. There was no way to find the real mail that was being sent to his house due to the literal tons of garbage that was arriving on his doorstep on the hour. He told reporters, they've signed me up for every advertising campaign and mailing list there is. These people are out of their minds. They're harassing me. Now, as sweet as this revenge is, you know, the spammer gets spammed, this was actually just the beginning of the suck for Alan. So while yes, he was being harassed by trolls online, he was also being investigated by a little organization called the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Because in 2005, his house was raided by the FBI, and the court case stretched on until 2009 when Alan Ralsky pleaded guilty to wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. They also found that he violated the 2003 Controlling the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing Act, known as the Can-Spam Act. Got caught for spamming because he was a spammer. He was also found guilty through the pump and dump kind of scams where he was deceptively getting people to wire him money and then hiding the profits and illegal activities in a way that made the profits look like legitimate assets. And he was sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in jail and fined $250,000, which is one of the few true victories in internet history that like we had a terrible spammer and we actually got him and he actually faced real world consequences for his actions. Alan Ralsky did serve his hard time and he was released in 2012. And that kind of seems to be where the Spam King story stops, as there's nothing really to be heard from him since his release, which granted he would be like around 80 years old now, and I feel like that spamming may just be a young man's game. But I just thought that that was a very interesting story to share with you all, kind of just like this video right here.